Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for our sixth seminar in the STIR seminar series. I'm Cynthia Pickering, and I'm one of the co-organizers of our 2022 STIR seminar series. And our seminar series is supported by Arizona State University, Maastricht University, and the European Association for the Study of Science and Technology. I'd like to also thank our co-organizers who are dispersed across the world. And this, I have to say, is our first session or series that we've had, over on the other side of the world, rather than the European or American continent. And I'd like to thank our co-organizers who help us to advertise our seminars. If any of you are here today, special thanks to you. Just to remind us all, the mission of the series is to create a STIR community, to learn from others, and to connect and grow and extend it. For those of you who might need a refresher, there are three methodological components to STIR: the decision protocol, the embedded humanist, or more broadly referred to as an ethos of engagement, and the analytical framework for midstream modulation. Together, these help us to collaboratively describe the normal expert decision-making processes in real time. Okay. So what are the objectives or the aims of STIR? We engage in these collaborative processes, such as STIR, to primarily understand the nature and limitations of expert capacities to participate in the broader frameworks and systems for the normative governance of research and innovation in society. Another aim is to explore the scope for expansion of these decision capacities. And finally, we seek to deepen these capacities where appropriate. However, we're very careful in such expansions. We want to avoid imposing normative concerns and frameworks on our STIR participants, but instead we use probing questions to shed light on alternative values and value considerations. The STIR community has been very active over the last decade. There have been about 80 studies which were conducted in 4 different continents. You can see them coming up here. And a number of scientific articles and reports have been documented as the results of these studies. And so every month during this seminar series, we're featuring at least one of these publications. And you can see our seminar series calendar, which is also on our website here, along with thumbnails of the papers which we put out there before the sessions. So this month, I'm very pleased to welcome Bastien Miorin, who will give us today's presentation, Contemplating Nanotechnology Waste in an Environmental Engineering Lab, a waste of time, or not. Bastien is currently a risk manager at Spark Northeast Link, and Spark is a multinational consortium featuring world-leading construction companies and is one of the largest road and tunnel operators in Australia. In today's seminar, Bastien will share earlier insights from a STIR project that he worked on with Dr. Eric Fisher that studied debates surrounding the nanotechnology waste dilemma and the subsequent call for public policy guidance. Bastien is still using midstream modulation and STIR engagement techniques for large 15 billion plus infrastructure transport projects, where the link between design and public good is obvious, but also needs constant attention and messaging, especially on environmental waste concerns. Bastien, I'd like to turn it over to you and let you take the floor. Thank you.
Thank you, Cynthia. Thanks all. Good afternoon or good morning. Just waking up here in Melbourne on a cold day. So Yes. Do you want me to share my screen at the same time?
Yes, please. Mhm.
Yes. Okay. All right. So a bit of context first. So the title is a little bit provocative. Waste of time as a question. The question is a little bit personal because, as you probably gathered, I left academia 12 years ago, 12, 13 years ago. So the question was this experiment 12 years ago a waste of time for me? But then when I chatted with Eric, and I thank him for the opportunity to chat again and present today, we also wanted to bring it a little bit multidimensional and think at the different level, macro, meso, micro, and nano. So we'll go through that a little bit later. Okay, so a bit of context and purpose. So that was back in 2010. I was an embedded social scientist in an environmental science lab somewhere in Western America. And the research that the research team was working on was at this time looking at the efficient ways of treating nano waste in different methodologies, and how we could eventually filter those waste through the wastewater through the sewer systems in America, with all sorts of considerations for the environment, but also for the cost. So it came up as a cost-effective solution as a goal for the research team. They were always looking as some efficient way to filter the nano waste so that they can provide a solution for the larger public. And when I started to be embedded in the project, I think one of the first questions with the different participants was to understand and to, for some of them that wasn't that clear, why do we do this, and why do we care about what the public thinks? That's what one of the participants pretty much asked me when I was looking a little bit more into the social purpose or political purpose of the project. His response was that it is not meant to think about what the public thinks, because his purpose on that lab was to just find the solution as an engineer or a researcher, or both actually in this case. And I think the STIR methodology was a great outcome in this case, because progressively, I think the midstream modulation, and you talked about the decision protocol at the beginning, definitely helped in terms of interaction with the different stakeholders. So back then, Eric presented me a little bit of the decision protocol too, and also explain a little bit around stakeholder engagement and metrics. And for me, that was something new, and I discovered the power of those tools with some participants more than others, but particularly two of them, which were probably in the mid to high level interaction levels. I could definitely document, and I did, an increased level of engagement and interest towards broader issues than just solving the technical issue there. So one participant even collaborated to the point that we started to work on a paper together, and we presented at a conference later in Washington D.C. around the engagement and the study within this lab. So for me, I think that was a powerful way of demonstrating how this tool was working in the lab. At that time, the big question mark was what regulation should there be around treatment of waste, of nano waste in the public water network. So we started to work on this paper, and as I said, we presented, and then later on, I think that was embedded within the third body of knowledge, and I decided to go another way. I decided to move to Australia to do some other things, and there I am now 12 years later. In terms of lessons learned and knowledge transfer, I think, so I already mentioned the stakeholder engagement skills is definitely something that I've learned on the job there, and something I'm really thankful for, because I keep using it, and I'll go through that a little bit later. Responsible innovation, so something that came up a little bit after the 12 weeks study in the lab was how do we consider innovation as a responsible advancement in the work that we do, and I wrote a paper for my university in France back then, comparing the different framework between France or Europe and America around the principle of carefulness and responsible innovation. In infrastructure, though, like these days, we also use a bit of environmental nanoengineering. So PFAS, which is a contamination, which is a chemical that has contaminated a lot of soil around industrial sites in the world, is increasingly a problem for large infrastructure projects such as tunnels, bridges, because usually if there is PFAS in the soil, it has to be treated in a different, expensive way. And nano engineering has come up as a way to tackle that in a more cost-effective way. So yeah, funnily enough, I still look at nano engineering innovation in these days works that I do with large projects. The other one that I progressively connected the dots about was the link between risk management and human factors, because I was definitely in a different capacity. So back then I was an embedded scientist, sort of first annoying a few researchers, and then becoming a bit of a go-to person for every consideration out of the scope of engineering, and so like looking at the broader social and political issues around the specific innovation that was worked on there. But later on, working on large projects for rail and road, but specifically rail, you find out that due to regulators and rail safety regulators, the human factors and the user experience component is a very important one. And having been embedded as a social scientist in a lab with engineers and research, I could definitely recycle this skills and knowledge on how to interact with goal-focused scientists or engineers to foster discussion towards the public good or human factors. How is the user eventually going to use this piece of equipment? And human factors is a great segue to this, especially studies around wayfinding, around train station, and the likes, and consideration of disabilities and access to all of the piece of infrastructure. So I think this first experiment with STIR definitely helped me to understand the importance of considering all aspects of a project. So benefits from midstream modulation from my personal experience. So I introduced earlier about the different levels that I wanted to talk about. So we will just focus here on the micro level. So at the macro level, I think there is a benefit to the industry and the regulatory framework to have those kind of interaction in the lab, because it fosters this discussion and then can go from a bottom-up approach relate to the higher level of decision. There's the micro level, which is the laboratory, and then the nano level, which are both the researcher and the embedded social scientists. At the micro level, I believe the laboratory, this specific lab where I was working, benefited from the research and from the study, because not only we had a few participants that were more engaged in the discussion, in the study discussion, but one of them participated in writing a paper. The director of the lab also came up with a plan to strengthen the collaboration between different faculties of this university in that field. So you could see in a medium term, because that was a 12-week study, you could see that in the medium term they had already some synergy benefits, some also so yeah, faculty synergy benefit, but also starting discussion at the broader level. So in terms of communication, that was definitely relayed, and discussion was starting around faculties, not just in this specific laboratory. So I think in terms of discussion, that was definitely an efficient way to propagate questions or discussion and start the interesting talk that is STIR, and integrating social and political questions within a lab and research. So these days, how do I still benefit from that experience, and why is it at the end of the day not a waste of time? So like I just mentioned, collaboration tools, the interview, the decision protocol, sorry, I still base some interviews of mine on this matrix. Stakeholders matrix, which is not specific to this project, but that was for me the first time I used this, and using interaction while getting knowledge from a stakeholder matrix and the different level of interaction definitely helped me to be a bit more efficient in the dialogue I'm having at the different levels, even today. So as a risk manager, you're not always deciding on the project, because project managers typically wants to get things done, and you still have to trigger the discussion to get all of the risks socialized, discussed, mitigated, And there are ways to trigger the discussion that I've learned from STIR, so that I don't pass for someone that just does the annoying mandatory aspect of a project, but someone that can help triggering benefits, the opportunities, and optimize it for the project. And also cost-benefit analysis of early engagement. So something I've learned along the years of working in projects and from a STIR perspective as well is that we talk about midstream modulation, but it's definitely the beginning of the midstream project life cycle that I think for me is more critical, because that's when you can shift the thinking at the early stage. And I'm kind of moving away the focus here from research and innovation to project management. I'm aware of that, but there's always a bit of innovation in the big projects that we undertake. So in large project management, I think it's more like a upstream/midstream modulation at the early stages of the project, and it's been demonstrated that having this early discussion around things like user experience, human factors, so social and political aspect of a project, and environmental as well, like the PFAS contamination risk. It's been demonstrated that having early discussion reduces the overall cost of the project. We have a few famous projects example in Australia where things like user experience, human factors, environmental contamination were found out a bit later, and projects were delayed, adding a lot of time and cost. And at the end of the day, the public is the one that suffers from a lack of early engagement. And that was essentially the extent of the presentation. So yeah, thank you for the opportunity. Are we moving to a Q&A format since after that?
Yes, we are moving to Q&A, and we have some questions in the chat, which can probably lead to more questions. So the first question is, yeah, thank you for the presentation so much. Very good. The first question's from Lyric, and she's referring back to a plan that you mentioned earlier that the lab manager came up with. And she asks, do you think that happened as a result of the STIR intervention?
Oh, yeah, that's a good question, because so I typically had 6 participants in the lab with different level of interaction, and funnily, it's not the ones that I was expecting to have the higher level of interaction who will be eventually coming to the party in terms of social technical interaction. So I think it's a mix of the STIR decision protocol, the methodology, and also some personal circumstances or convictions in some case, like opinions. So in one of the participants' case, that was someone that I studied as a low level of interaction and became medium, and then at the end it was the main point of contact, and that was this person here who first responded, what do I care what the public thinks. And I think it's the mix of having someone present in the lab, so like the actual physical presence of someone there as a point of contact actually did change the data, because I was there. I was able to help to assist with some mundane tasks. Obviously, I was not the researcher there, and I was visible. So for someone like this, it triggers question. That someone is in the lab, not a scientist, asking questions that are not related to the pure technical aspects. Across along the different numbers of weeks, he became increasingly engaged, and at the end, he is the one who was keen to do more. Yeah.
That's really interesting. Thanks for explaining more. I had kind of a follow-up question, which was, I couldn't quite catch what the lab manager's plan, what that was like focused around. I think you said something about like knowledge transfer. Was there any involvement of nano waste disposal in the plan, or was the plan focused on something else?
The plan of the lab, I think that the objective of the lab was to find ways to filter. I think that was CNT, carbon nanotube, to be able to filter them through and not going through the waste network in American cities. So that was the objective of the lab. When we started the collaboration, I think the director was just interested and curious, and I had maybe 1 or 2 meetings with him, and essentially a welcoming meeting. But it's only after I had this high level of interaction and interest from a few participants that he became a little bit more involved to presentations that we had a bit later. I think what was interesting is that it didn't go as planned in terms of which participant would be more interested in that. So typically, the director or the manager would allocate people that he or she thinks are more inclined to work towards these considerations, but somehow it worked out that it was different people in the lab who were more interested or active in that field. I think that was an interesting shift from a plan versus actual occurrence.
Cool. That answers my question. Thank you.
Thanks.
And we have another question. Marika, did you want to ask your question, or do you want me to moderate it?
Please read it out, Cynthia. Thank you.
Okay. Bastien, where did the impression that STIR could be a waste of time come from? Was that a thought you had or something your participants said?
Yeah, okay, good question. So at the beginning, yes, it's definitely, the typical hostile sort of male engineer way of thinking, like, why do we bother? And I have the same thing around project management. Why do we do this? So there's always this first sort of rejection sort of reaction, because it's extra work, it's extra something else that we need to all of a sudden do without sort of knowledge of this before. So there is that dimension, and also that was a bit of a joke around around waste, and also because I left academia 12 years ago, and sometimes I ask myself, why did I move to another industry? I could have pursued to a PhD, and I decided to go in the industry. It's an interesting question, as in why did I go this way, and was it a waste of time to do this social technical interaction? And when you dig a bit deeper, you actually find out that some tools like the decision protocol and stakeholder engagement are still tools that I use on a daily basis today. Does that answer the question? Or?
Thank you.
Okay.
The multidimensional considerations of waste.
Yes.
Okay. I had a question. When you were talking about, at first you were considered as being annoying, but then later on the engineers started to come to you for what they felt were outside of their engineering scope. Could you provide some examples of things they might have come to you and asked you about? And were these happening within STIR dialogues or outside of STIR dialogues, or both?
Yeah, good one. So they were the scheduled interaction, but progressively the participants came to me around ad hoc questions. So on top of the periodic interviews we had, they would progressively, and especially this participant that I mentioned in the first slide, he would come more regularly for other questions and the implication of the research on the public. So that's when really the trigger. That's when we really triggered the discussion around cost-benefit analysis, which was kind of in the back of everyone's mind there, because they were looking at cost-effective solutions to treat non-waste, and they were still not there. They were working towards it, and at the same time, they are not the one making the decision on what is cost-effective for the community. The councils do that. So the trick there, the tricky question was, why do we do what we do? Who's going to use it? In terms of public policy, shouldn't it be more regulated so that our research is supported and can help community in the broader sense, not just the local council or the state government? So yeah, that was definitely interesting discussion from someone who early on was not so keen on talking about political science or social science, and then at the end was fully on board with working with social scientists towards integration of those concerns in his research.
Thank you. At any time did equity come into the public policy discussion?
Equity?
Uh-huh.
No, not back then.
Efficiency, effectiveness, cost, mostly.
Oh yeah. No. We didn't go that far in the discussion with him.
And then Marika has another question. Could you say more about the synergies focus? How did you adjust the STIR method to include such a focus?
Yes, so universities, they are, especially in America, you can see they are businesses. and they have business model. And where I was in Europe, it's probably a bit less business focused, but you have different faculties that may be working on their own in a silo approach, or they may be working together. And I think what I learned from America is that there is a will to have this collaboration, this interdisciplinary approach between faculties, and I think that's a great outcome for any business. In project management is definitely something that I enjoy fostering, is interdisciplinarity between engineers, between compliance departments such as environment or sustainability, or risk management in my case, or safety. I think that was the big benefit for me as well, is to really ensure that interdisciplinarity is a top level focus as far as I'm able to push the agenda in a project, or in that case in a study.
I'm not sure if you hear me well, but if you do, I'm just wondering if I understood you correctly.
Oh.
In interdisciplinarity, that's the same for you, or is there difference between?
I didn't get that, sorry. I got the first.
Oh, right.
Then it cuts, yeah.
I think she's going to type it in the chat.
I write it in the chat.
Yeah.
Is there a difference between synergy and interdisciplinarity? Yes, there is, in terms of efficiency. So interdisciplinarity is intellectually always a good thing, I think, to be doing, to go back and forth between disciplines, and looking at a different approach to tackle the solutions, such as in this case environmental research on the treatment of nanowaste. Synergy is more of a business focused approach, where you not only gather different departments or different teams around a specific topic, but you also want to do it in an efficient way, so that time is mutualized between the two. So instead of two teams working on the same project at different times, they can work at the same time on the same project. So it involves a bit of a time saving difference, while interdisciplinarity doesn't have to be necessarily efficient. It doesn't have to be saving time for business purposes or efficiency purposes.
I had another question, Bastien. You mentioned, before I move on to a different topic, I think Marika had a follow-up question.
Yeah, did you adjust the STEM methods to create synergistic effects? A little bit, and I think Eric and the team helped me in that way, because they showed me that they were involved in the lab, assisting. I can't remember who did it, but I remember pictures of them assisting the researcher in their mundane tasks or less mundane. But in my case, I was definitely helping with the simple stuff, whatever I could help with. So showing this proactive approach and being willing to have the we say in French, mettre la main à la pâte, put your hand in the pace, actually helping was a good way to demonstrate that STIR was not only about interdisciplinarity, but also helping the lab or the research unit to have a optimized outcome. So the way I try to adjust the STIR method to create synergistic effects is probably by prioritizing the interaction by the stakeholder matrix and the interaction level. And because there was this evolutive part where the original participants were not at the end the ones that were so keen on interacting, and vice versa. So we had an evolution of plan versus actual. So having a bit of mapping of the stakeholder interaction level is something that helped to adjust the STIR method to have synergistic effects.
That kind of dovetails into what I was going to ask, which is, did you collect any, or rather than collect, did you get any feedback from the participants at the end of the study?
Yes. Especially those that were at the highest level of interaction. I think for two of them, that was definitely a positive experience. They both included it as part of their resume as a university researcher. That was also positive for them to show that they could get out of their mere discipline and think a little bit more broadly and even strategically. So yeah, that we try to capitalize on that sort of win-win situation. But I think from an individual perspective, especially for those at the highest level of interaction, I had positive feedback.
Yeah, that's interesting. The reason why I thought about it is because you had mentioned on a couple of your slides the human factors and the user experience benefits. And it sounds like there were definitely benefits for like the end users, especially with like the train stations and projects like that. But I was also thinking about the user experience for the participants. It sounds like the STIR intervention increased their user experience just working in the lab. Do you think that's accurate?
Yes, and obviously for each project, the more advanced and repetitive you get, the better you become with this kind of consideration, such as user experience or participants' experience in our case. So I had the benefit of a few STIR previous studies. So Eric mentioned who did it before, how it went, and lessons learned. So I could gather a little bit of lessons learned from that perspective. But also, I was fairly new in the English-speaking world, so that was a bit of a learning curve for me to, on every perspective, cultural and everything. And I guess I was looking at improving the experience of everyone, including me, to make it as seamless as possible.
Right. And So Bastien, were your participants, were you speaking multiple languages during the experiment, or was it all mostly in one language?
That was pretty much all American. Yeah, no French, no German, just English.
Gotcha. Because I'm sure, Marika, you might also experience this. Like, there could be some different things that come up when you are speaking in different languages, kind of like code switching almost, depending on which participant you're working with. So that's an interesting thing to think about.
Yeah, I think so. I can't remember, but I know there's it might be in China. There was a study, and the participant was able to speak in other language than English. So yeah, I don't. Marika, you speak Dutch, or is it the other language that you go to when?
I'm not sure if you hear me well, but if
Yeah.
you can, so yeah, now it's better. No, so my steer study was in France, and I'm not a native French speaker. I mean, I learned French at high school and then did my steer intervention. And I also experienced, was a big learning curve in terms of how my French improved at the time of my steer intervention. But I think, yeah, you can see it goes as a weakness and as a strength. So when you don't speak a language fluently, I mean, of course, I did speak, but not as well as I speak English. But then, of course, you have much more opportunities to ask your participants to define specific terms. And that, of course, helps you take less for granted, which we usually do, right? When we speak the same language and you kind of have the feeling, I know what a neuron is, for instance, right? Because I work with neuroscientists. But yeah, no, actually I don't. So, and then you have much more opportunities to ask for explanations. But that also meant that my steer exercises lasted much longer than they would usually do. I ended up sometimes having 2-hour discussions with participants over the steer protocol because there was just so much to explain. But that also helped me use steer not only as a tool for intervention, but also as an ethnographic method, right? Because basically it was an ethnographic or an interview together with a steer exercise. And of course, then, yeah, that's now focusing more on the upsides, but the downsides are, that you understand much less of the nuances, right? That I could have possibly grasped if I had done the steer exercise in my niche. And I think that is particularly relevant, especially when you do ethnographic research besides the exercises. Lots of the things that happen over lunch, of course, were in effect because, I don't understand the expressions and people mumble. I had trouble understanding their French, but again, I think you can really interpret it in two ways, and also see language itself, right, as an object of inquiry that can be unpacked in these steer exercises. So that's my experience with doing steer in another language.
Yeah, that's interesting. I can definitely relate to the part where you constantly rephrase question, and this way you actually have more angles to approach a question if you always question your understanding. Yeah, that's very true. Okay. Any other question?
I was wondering, Bastien, I know that you have since kind of pivoted in your career, and I was just wondering if STIR has any role in your current activities, or if you have plans to do STIR again.
Yeah, actually it does. Like 12 years later, I can tell it. I did a bit of a shift back to sort of social and political implications of technical projects, because when I first moved to Australia, I was more like business and accounting focused. So I was doing compliance, but in a more mundane, if you want, accounting and reporting kind of way for a mining company. And then slowly I started to be more involved in health and safety and risk management and things that I was more attracted to because they talk to me a little bit more than financial reports, but that's everyone's preference. Over the last 12 years, I can definitely see my path going more towards this kind of consideration around risk management, human factors, user experience, the public good. Because at the end of the day, those projects are, $15 billion from the tax office. It's something that can always go wrong, and big projects usually go a little bit wrong in terms of public spending and time of the public. So at the moment, I'm in the largest project in Australia, and there's a big focus on risk because previous projects have blown up, so we want to make sure that we don't blow up the budget again and benefit the public good in the best way possible. So this kind of keeps me interested in the job because there's this public good dimension that I think I was always interested in.
So in your industry in Australia, do you find that considering the public good is a capacity that that is more represented now?
I work on public infrastructure projects, so paid by the government and sometimes private finances as well. But there's an obvious public focus because these are projects that are delivered for the public. So there is an obvious sort of link towards public, also because I used to be in public transport. Now I'm more into like roads. I think with Melbourne, Australia-wide, but specifically Melbourne, there is a realization that this city has grown up quite fast in the last 20 years, so fast that the infrastructure struggled to keep up with the expansion of the geographic city. So you still have level crossings in inner cities, so railroad crossing, which you won't find things like this at this level of traffic in large city in other part of the world. While typically in Europe you won't find that. So there is a bit of catch up that the local government has been willing to do, and I think it's great to have this sort of big works approach. Also because during this big project contract, they usually organize contracts around PPP or alliance or joint ventures, and the government usually incentivize the businesses by way of innovation. So if you are able to innovate on a project, it's a win-win situation for both the contractor and the state government that can communicate about an innovation and a way that they manage to save money for the public, or a way they manage to save the environment or improve the quality of the air, or any improvement. So there is this innovation focus that also I've been working on to grab as much as possible when I was on different projects. Yeah.
Cool. It sounds like it's a great fit for you. Thank you for explaining that more.
Thank you. Thanks for the question.
Yeah, thank you very much, Bastien. And I think you just answered my last question that I put in the chat about the types of decision makers that you're working with as you were talking to Lyric's question. I was just curious if you're still working with the engineers who are making decisions, or it sounds like maybe a bit of both.
Yes, I'm constantly working with project engineer, project managers that are typically engineers, and yeah, they're my team. For the last 4 years, I've been running a lot of risk workshop, and that's another interesting, sometimes ethnographic experience as well. Risk workshop. Yeah.
Okay, well, we really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us about what you're currently doing and how some of what the STIR work that you did carries over. And we were also interested in hearing more about the STIR study that you presented at the beginning. So thank you very much. If there's no further questions, or if you have no further questions for us, Bastien, I think we can go ahead and call it a wrap for today. Okay.
That's it. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks. Have a good day.
Thanks, Bastien.
Bye-bye.